When my mother-in-law saw my outfit at her birthday party, she tried to humiliate me in front of everyone. But what happened next left the entire room silent. I had only been married into the Ashford family for a year, and fitting in was never easy. I was Celine Ward, 27, independent, and far from the polished image my husband's family demanded. Lorraine Ashford, my mother-in-law, loved perfection, and anyone who didn't meet her standards quickly became her target. The night of her 55th birthday party, I walked into her grand estate wearing a striped fitted top, a simple choker, and jeans. It was my style, bold but comfortable. The chandeliers sparkled above, waiters carried trays of champagne, and the room buzzed with wealthy business elites. As soon as Lorraine's eyes landed on me, I saw them narrow like blades. She wasted no time. "Is this what you thought was appropriate for my birthday? My son really chose this." Her words cut through the air, followed by quiet chuckles from a few guests. My cheeks burned, and I turned to Grayson, my husband, hoping for support. He stayed silent, his lips pressed into a thin line, betraying me without a single word. I excused myself to the restroom, gripping the sink as humiliation threatened to spill into tears. It wasn't the first time Lorraine belittled me. She had called me unpolished, compared me to Grayson's ex, and reminded me that I wasn't their kind of people. I stared at my reflection, cheeks flushed, heart racing. Instead of breaking down, something inside me hardened. I whispered to myself that this wouldn't go unpunished. At home later, I asked Grayson why he let her speak to me that way. His response cut deeper than her insult. "You embarrassed yourself, Celine. Mom was just being honest." That night, I overheard him laughing on the phone with Lorraine, mocking me together. The betrayal from my own husband shattered something in me. Soon, I began noticing his late nights and secretive texts. Following my instincts, I dug deeper until I found the truth. Grayson was cheating with Clara Jennings, Lorraine's personal assistant. It felt like fire in my chest, but I didn't confront him. Instead, I gathered evidence, receipts, messages, photos. I confided only in my closest friend, Maeve, who reminded me not to act recklessly. Lorraine's next big charity gala became my stage. I walked into the glittering ballroom in a stunning gown, radiating confidence. Lorraine, smug as ever, smirked and said, "At least you dressed better this time." Improvement. I met her eyes calmly and replied, "Funny, Lorraine. While you judged me, your son was busy with Clara in hotel rooms." Gasps spread like wildfire. I revealed the printed receipts, texts, and photos. Faces turned pale. Grayson stuttered, Lorraine's jaw dropped, and Clara fled. I walked out that night with my dignity intact while their carefully crafted image crumbled. They tried to strip me of respect over clothes, but I stripped them of their lies. I wasn't broken. I was free. Lorraine's words hit me like a slap. She stood in the middle of her glittering party, her voice raised just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Is this really what you thought was appropriate for my birthday? My son chose this?" She looked me up and down as if I were some unwanted guest instead of her daughter-in-law. Conversations nearby paused. Glasses stopped midair. A couple of guests exchanged looks, while others chuckled behind their hands. My cheeks burned instantly. I could feel the heat spreading across my face, the weight of every eye in that room pressing against me. The dress code wasn't even formal, yet somehow, I was singled out as if I had committed a crime. I glanced at Grayson, standing just a few steps away. His expression was blank, his lips tight, but he didn't say a single word. Not a defense, not even a hand on mine to calm me. His silence was louder than her insult. I tried to stand straight, but inside I was folding in on myself. My stomach twisted, my palms grew damp, and all I wanted was for the ground to open up and swallow me whole. The party lights blurred as tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Lorraine was still watching me, her face sharp with satisfaction, like she had finally proven her point in front of her crowd. The laughter stung more than her words. Strangers who didn't even know me smirked as though they were in on some joke. I bit the inside of my cheek to steady myself. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. My body stayed frozen, but inside, every nerve screamed. A waiter walked past offering champagne, and for a second, I wanted to grab a glass just to keep my shaking hands occupied. Instead, I clasped them together and forced myself to breathe slowly. I could hear the buzz of whispers circling, people asking each other what I was thinking wearing this, others defending me in hushed tones, but none of it mattered. The person who should have been at my side, the one who had promised to protect me, said nothing. Lorraine carried on with her party as if nothing had happened, smiling wide at her friends, leaving me standing there like an outsider. My dignity felt stripped away, but I refused to walk out. Leaving would mean she won, and I wasn't about to hand her that victory. So I stayed rooted, swallowing my humiliation like poison. My heart pounded in my ears, my chest tight with anger I couldn't release. I told myself to hold on, to survive the night, because deep down, something told me this moment wasn't just another insult. It was the breaking point, the start of something I couldn't yet name, a shift that would change everything. I slipped away from the crowded hall, moving quickly so no one could stop me. My chest felt tight, and my hands trembled as I pushed open the restroom door. The moment it closed behind me, I grabbed the edge of the sink and held on as if it were the only thing keeping me standing. My reflection stared back at me, red cheeks, eyes watery, lips pressed hard together to keep from breaking. The humiliation still echoed in my ears, but behind it was something stronger building, something I had been ignoring for too long. I thought about the countless moments that led here, all the times Lorraine had chipped away at me little by little. She once called me unpolished, as though I were some rough stone her son had picked up from the dirt. Another time, she told me outright that she didn't see how someone like me could ever match Grayson's background. The words had stung then, but I brushed them off, convincing myself it was just her way of protecting her family. And as if that weren't enough, she often found ways to bring up Grayson's ex, praising her style, her education, her family connections. Everything she thought I lacked. Each reminder left me smaller, but I had stayed silent, hoping that kindness and patience would eventually soften her. Now, staring at myself under the harsh restroom lights, I saw clearly how wrong I had been. I had allowed her to decide my worth. I had stood by while she chipped away at my confidence, while she treated me like a mistake her son made. Even worse, I had let Grayson's silence convince me that maybe she was right. My hands clenched tighter around the porcelain as a wave of shame threatened to pull me under, but I fought it back. This time, I wasn't going to cry. Breathing deeply, I lifted my chin and studied my reflection again. The woman staring back at me wasn't weak. She was angry. That anger filled the hollow space where sadness used to live, and slowly it steadied me. Lorraine thought she had broken me tonight, but she had no idea what she had unleashed. A vow began to form, not out of spite, but out of survival. I couldn't keep letting her trample me. I couldn't keep shrinking while she stood tall on the ruins of my self-respect. I had to draw a line, and I had to make sure she felt the weight of every cruel word she had ever spoken. I wiped my face, straightened my top, and took one last look in the mirror. No more running to the bathroom to hide. No more swallowing my pain. If she wanted me small, she was about to see just how wrong she was. Quietly, firmly, I promised myself this night wouldn't end with her victory. One day soon, she would regret underestimating me. When we returned home that night, the silence between us was heavier than the ride itself. I waited until we stepped inside before I finally asked what had been building inside me all evening. Why didn't you defend me? My voice was calm, but underneath it carried all the hurt I had been holding in. Grayson barely looked at me as he loosened his tie. You embarrassed yourself, Celine. Mom was just being honest. You can't expect me to argue with her when you walked in looking like that. His tone was dismissive, as though my pain was an inconvenience rather than something he needed to care about. His words struck me harder than Lorraine's insult. I could feel the wall rising between us, something that hadn't been there before, a crack splitting the foundation of our marriage. I wanted to argue, to tell him how much it hurt standing there alone while his mother belittled me, but his indifference stopped me. It was as if my feelings didn't matter at all. I walked into the bedroom, needing space to breathe. Lying there in the dim light, I couldn't stop replaying the scene over and over. Each time I remembered his silence, it cut deeper. Later that night, as I stepped into the hallway to get some water, I heard his voice coming from the study. At first, I thought he was just on a work call, but then I caught my own name. I paused, leaning closer. His laugh followed. Yeah, she looked ridiculous tonight. Don't worry, I'll handle her. My stomach sank. He wasn't just ignoring me. He was mocking me with the very woman who had humiliated me. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind tried to make excuses, but the truth was clear. He had taken her side completely. The man I trusted, the one who was supposed to protect me, had chosen to join in her cruelty instead. That betrayal twisted inside me, worse than anything Lorraine had done. I stepped back quietly, not wanting him to know I was there. My hands shook as I closed the bedroom door behind me. The bed felt colder than ever, and lying there I realized something important. This wasn't just about a mother-in-law who disliked me. This was about a husband who let her break me down, and then laughed about it afterward. Sleep never came that night. I stared at the ceiling, feeling my world tilt in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time, I wondered if our marriage was already beyond saving. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was beginning to see the truth. If he could betray me like this once, what else was he capable of? And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of something much darker. The days that followed felt different, even if Grayson tried to act as though nothing had happened. I noticed the small shifts first. He started coming home later than usual, brushing it off with excuses about meetings that supposedly ran long. His phone, once left on the counter without thought, was now always in his pocket, the screen turned away whenever a message appeared. At night, while I tried to sleep, I would hear the faint tap of him typing under the glow of his phone. At first, I told myself I might be overthinking. Maybe the stress of Lorraine's party was making me paranoid. But then I saw the receipts. Dinners at places he hadn't taken me, charges on cards that didn't match the stories he told. Each clue stacked on top of the other until doubt became certainty. Something was going on, and I needed to know what. I started paying attention more closely. When he claimed to be busy, I tracked the times he left and returned. When he said he was exhausted from work, I noticed the faint scent of perfume clinging to him, one I didn't own. I knew if I asked directly, he'd deny it, twisting the blame back on me like he always did. So instead, I decided to find the truth on my own. It didn't take long before the pieces lined up. One evening, while folding laundry, his phone buzzed on the dresser. The preview of the message flashed long enough for me to catch a name: Clara. My stomach tightened. Clara Jennings, Lorraine's personal assistant. A woman always at her side, smiling sweetly, running errands, attending meetings. It suddenly made sense why Lorraine had been so calm lately, why Grayson seemed more distant with me, but more cheerful around his mother. Clara wasn't just helping Lorraine. She was involved with my husband. The discovery hollowed me out. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in my hand, reading the words Clara had sent him. Flirty. Familiar. The kind of tone only two people hiding something would use. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight, but I didn't cry. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was a strange clarity. If I confronted him now, he would deny everything, twist it, maybe even make me feel like I was imagining it. I couldn't let that happen. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. That night, I began saving everything I could find. Screenshots of messages, copies of receipts, photographs of the times his car was parked outside places he shouldn't have been. I kept it all hidden where he wouldn't think to look. Each piece of evidence felt like a weapon, something to protect me when the time came. The heartbreak was still there, but I refused to let it control me. If he had chosen to betray me with someone so close to his mother, then both of them would eventually face the consequences. All I had to do was wait, prepare, and strike when the moment was right. I couldn't carry the weight of what I knew alone, so I reached out to the one person I trusted completely, Maeve Callahan. She had been my closest friend since college, someone who had seen me at my best and my worst. When I told her what I had discovered, she didn't interrupt, she just listened, her eyes steady on mine while I poured out the truth. I want to end this now, I admitted, my hands twisting together as if they could wring out the pain. But Maeve shook her head gently. Don't rush into it, Celine. If you go in without proof, he'll deny everything. And Lorraine will make sure you're the one blamed. You need to be careful. Her words stilled me. I realized she was right. Acting out of anger would only backfire. That night, lying awake, I thought about how deep this betrayal really went. It wasn't just Grayson's unfaithfulness that broke me. It was the way Lorraine had her hand in all of it, whether directly or not. Clara wasn't just any woman. She was Lorraine's assistant, her shadow, someone she trusted. If Grayson was involved with her, then in some way, Lorraine must have known, maybe even encouraged it. Suddenly, everything made sense. The smirks, the constant belittling, the way Grayson always seemed to lean on his mother's approval more than mine. It wasn't just a marriage problem anymore. It was a game Lorraine had been playing, and I had been the pawn. That thought changed everything. For the first time since this all began, I didn't feel powerless. The ache in my chest was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. I decided I wasn't going to cry in bathrooms anymore. Wasn't going to beg Grayson for respect he would never give. Instead, I would take back my power piece by piece. So, I began carefully. I created a folder on a drive no one else could access. Every text message I captured, every receipt I copied, every suspicious detail I logged. I wasn't just looking for proof of an affair. I was building a wall of evidence so strong that no one could tear it down. I took photos when I saw his car parked outside hotels, screenshotted every sweet message that popped up from Clara, and even documented the nights he claimed to be at work while charges appeared for expensive dinners. Each detail I saved gave me a little more strength. What once felt like helplessness now turned into a quiet determination. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of control over my own life. The woman who had stood silently while Lorraine mocked her was gone. In her place was someone who knew the truth, someone who was no longer afraid of it. I didn't know exactly how it would end, but I knew one thing with certainty. They wouldn't see it coming. My revenge would be patient, calculated, and unforgettable. I watched the guest list for Lorraine's next big night like it was a map. This event would be full of people who mattered to her. Donors, board members, old friends, the kind of crowd whose opinion could ruin or save a reputation. I made sure the names I cared about were on it. The people who would notice if something went wrong for the Ashfords. I learned the seating plan, the order of speeches, and when the photographers would move through the room. If I wanted to expose them, I needed to pick the exact moment when the crowd's attention would be fixed on the stage. I didn't just plan to interrupt. I wanted the scene to look natural, not like a sudden outburst. So I lined up small details that would force the truth forward. I arranged for a program to be placed at every seat with Lorraine's biography and the list of gala sponsors. I made sure the gala's schedule included a quiet pause right after Lorraine's speech, a gap where people would be listening, waiting for applause. That quiet moment would be my opening. Clothes matter in a room full of judges, so I chose an outfit that spoke calm power. I didn't want flash or drama. I wanted an appearance that made it impossible for Lorraine to insult me without appearing petty. My dress was simple but flawless, tailored to fit with clean lines and a steady color that read serious, not showy. I arranged for a trusted seamstress to make last-minute adjustments so everything would sit right under the lights. I practiced how I would walk, how I would stand, how I would smile without looking like I was counting seconds. Getting Clara and Grayson in the same place at the same time was easier than I thought. Lorraine loved to show off her inner circle at events like this. She always made sure her assistant was by her side. Grayson, who liked the easy public face of a successful family, rarely missed an event his mother hosted. I confirmed their attendance quietly through mutual acquaintances and by watching their patterns. Once I was sure they would both be present, I focused on how to make the evidence visible without seeming theatrical. I prepared everything to be indisputable and unavoidable. Printed copies of messages and receipts went into a slim folder, organized in order with dates clearly marked. I labeled photos with locations and times. I made a small thumb drive with files named plainly so anyone could open them without fuss. These items were hidden in a clutch I could carry casually. I also made backup copies stored in places only I knew. To avoid any suspicion, I created a reason to be near the stage. I volunteered to help with a minor part of the program, handing out awards, which put me close to the microphone and gave me a legitimate path to the center of attention. I practiced what I would say so it sounded calm and factual, not like a setup. I also arranged for Maeve to be in the audience in a seat that allowed her to hand me something if plans changed. Her presence was my safety net. The night I chose was crowded, polished, and gleaming. I felt everything fall into place as I moved through the room, each small decision tightening the noose around the image they had built. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I waited for the exact second when silence and attention met, opened my clutch, and stepped forward with everything I needed in my hands. The room fell quiet after Lorraine's barb, the laugh dying fast as people sensed the tension. I stepped forward with a calm I hadn't felt in months. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I walked to the microphone as if I belonged on that stage and looked straight at the people who had been watching me like a curiosity. My voice was steady when I asked for a moment of attention. I held up a small envelope and then a USB drive. I had prepared for this exact second, everything organized so no one could dismiss it as drama. First, I handed a copy of a dated hotel bill to the gala coordinator. Then I asked the photographer to show a sequence of pictures on the large screen behind Lorraine. Faces in the crowd shifted. Phones came up to record. The energy changed from polite applause to a nervous, electric murmur. Calmly, I read short lines from messages I had saved, the kind that make private things painfully clear: names, times, short plans. I didn't need to display every intimate detail. A few clear examples were enough to make the pattern plain. When the images appeared, they showed Grayson leaving a hotel late at night, his car parked by a service entrance, and then him with Clara in places that matched the receipts. The evidence connected in a way words alone could not. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then a ripple of shocked voices spread through the room. Some guests covered their mouths. Others whispered to the person beside them, disbelief written on their faces. Lorraine's composure cracked. The color drained from her cheeks and her smile froze. Grayson's jaw worked as he searched for something to say, but his eyes were wide and empty. I watched him try to form a sentence and fail. Clara, sitting close to Lorraine, looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She rose quickly, stumbling through a whisper of apologies, and tried to slip away toward the exit. A staff member blocked her path politely but firmly. The crowd's eyes followed every step. Someone near the front asked if the police should be called. My friend Maeve stood when she saw Clara move and made a point to block her path, keeping her from making an escape until more organizers intervened. Camera flashes popped as members of the press, present because of the gala, leaned forward. Conversations that had been about donations and speeches suddenly turned to loyalty and truth. People who had smiled at Lorraine earlier that night now looked uncertain, glancing between her and the images on the screen. A couple of her closest associates shifted away, their faces hard to read, and a few guests quietly gathered their coats. Grayson finally opened his mouth to deny everything, but the receipts and photos were already in people's hands. Denial rang hollow when so many documents lined up together. He faltered, anger flickering into panic. Lorraine tried to speak, to smooth it over with an elegant excuse, but the words came out thin. The room no longer allowed her to control the story. Through it all, I stayed composed. I let the facts speak. The humiliation that had once crushed me was now a tool I used with care. I didn't dance on anyone's ruin. I simply put the truth where everyone could see it and watched how the careful image they had built began to fall apart under honest light. The moment the screen went dark, the air inside the ballroom changed completely. Laughter and polite conversation had vanished. Instead, people huddled in small clusters, whispering urgently, pointing toward Lorraine and her son. The music faltered, then stopped altogether as if even the band didn't know how to continue. The polished atmosphere that had taken weeks to prepare unraveled in seconds. Lorraine stood frozen, her hands trembling against the edge of the stage. For years she had lived for her reputation, guarding it like treasure, and now it slipped from her grasp in front of the very people she wanted to impress. A sheen of sweat appeared on her forehead. Her smile had disappeared, replaced by a vacant stare as her legs wavered beneath her. She reached for a chair nearby to steady herself, her shoulders slumping as though the weight of every secret she had hidden pressed down at once. Guests who once surrounded her with compliments now pulled away. Some avoided looking at her at all, afraid to be associated with the scandal. Others shook their heads with disapproval, whispering to their partners before quietly excusing themselves from the gala. The Ashfords' name, which had once commanded attention, was now being dismantled by whispers that grew louder with every passing moment. Grayson, unable to control his rising anger, stormed toward me with a clenched jaw. His voice was raised, sharp and bitter, but before he could reach me, two men, colleagues who had seen enough, stepped between us. Their hands pressed firmly against his chest, stopping him from lunging further. One of them warned him to calm down, while another reminded him that the room was filled with cameras. Grayson struggled for a moment, then realized fighting would only dig him deeper. He spat out words under his breath, his face red with rage, but he stayed put. Lorraine tried to regain her footing, muttering something about lies, yet her voice cracked. Nobody believed her. The documents and images had spoken louder than she ever could. The more she denied, the more people turned away, unwilling to listen. Her once flawless control had shattered, leaving her exposed in front of the very circle she had ruled with elegance and pride. I didn't raise my voice or add fuel to the fire. Instead, I stood tall, shoulders straight, every step measured. The silence around me felt different now, not dismissive, but watchful, almost respectful. When I walked across the floor, heads turned. No one laughed, no one whispered against me anymore. I had given them truth, and the truth lingered long after the evidence had been tucked away. At the exit, I glanced back briefly. Lorraine had sunk into her chair, her face pale, her eyes glassy with disbelief. Grayson stood beside her, seething but powerless. Clara was gone entirely, having slipped out earlier. The empire they had built on appearances was collapsing in real time, every brick of their reputation falling apart under the eyes of their once loyal admirers. I left the hall with my head held high, my steps unhurried. For the first time, I felt no weight on my chest. The lies, the control, the constant criticism, none of it had power over me anymore. Behind me was a crumbling world they could no longer repair. Ahead of me was silence, freedom, and the strength of knowing I had turned their cruelty into their downfall. I filed for divorce, making sure I had every piece of evidence ready to protect myself. The documents, the receipts, the messages, and the photos all worked in my favor. Nothing could be twisted or denied, and for the first time in a long while, I felt secure. Grayson went from dismissive to desperate in an instant. He begged me to forgive him, swore he would change, promised things he should have given me from the beginning. I listened, but my heart stayed cold. I remembered his silence when I needed him, his cruel laughter behind my back, and his betrayal with someone I was supposed to trust. I looked him in the eyes and said no. It was final, and I felt stronger than ever. Lorraine, who once looked down on me with pride, faced her own ruin. People stopped calling her, business partners turned away, and the woman who demanded respect now lived in the shadow of shame. She had wanted to humiliate me over something as small as my clothes, but she ended up humiliated herself in ways she could never recover from. Clara disappeared soon after. She thought she could hide behind Lorraine's power and Grayson's lies, but once the truth came out, there was no place left for her. She slipped away quietly, leaving nothing but whispers and disgrace behind her. When I look back, I realize they tried to strip me of my dignity, but instead, I stripped them of their masks. I walked away free, with peace in my heart and the strength to never let anyone silence me again.